jams are in the rearview mirror. So let's call this meeting to order. This is December 1st, and our first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the November 3rd meeting of this year. For any corrections or omissions, I have a motion by Councilmember Jones and a second by Council President Cole. If there's no discussion, I'll vote. Oops, cast your vote.
I'm casting.
Just keep spamming it.
Oh,
It says it's received, but
There you go. Maybe needs batteries.
you voted yes?
Let's get that chart.
Happy South
South County.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did he grab that?
maybe it's
Oh, that's what's happened. Switch.
2 votes for me.
Okay.
Like that.
You can erase South County. Okay. Voting is complete. Cast the vote and eliminate the South County route. Okay, that passes unanimously. Do we have any requests for public communications?
I do not.
Okay. We move on to consent. There's no report, but the legislative status report is there for information.
Move approval. Oh, information.
I don't think we have
Information.
to
Withdraw.
Okay. If there are no questions, we can move on then to item number 4, review of the agendas. And Victoria Steckwick will give us that excellent report.
Good morning. So for your December 15th draft board business agenda, we have item number 1, which is approval of the meeting minutes, followed by item number 2, which is public comments, member comments, followed by action from policy advisory committees. Under your consent calendar, we have item number 4, which is your approval of the proposed solicitation and contract awards. At this time, we know of 2 awards, one for the roadway toll collection system and a second for the Poinsettia Station. Item number 5 is the revised 2018 Board of Directors Policy Advisory Committee's annual meeting calendar. Regional Planning is moving its meeting time to 12:30, so we need reapproval of the calendar. Item number 6 is the FY17 Transit Development Act audit extension. At this time, we know of 1 request from NCTD. Item number 7 is the revised 2018 weighted voting formula. This is per AB 805, and we'll be providing an information report on the weighted voting formula. Item number 8 is your report on meetings, followed by item 9, the report summarizing delegated actions taken by the executive director. Under chairs of report, you have item number 10, which is the election of the 2018 board officers, which we're seeking approval for. Under reports, we have item number 11, which is the proposed new board policy number 39, which you'll be hearing about today. Item 12 is the 10-year comprehensive program review. We'd like to push this for timing purposes to the January meeting. Item number 13 is the regional growth forecast methodology, which we'll be discussing in relation to the regional transportation plan. Item 14 is the Smart Growth Incentive Program and Active Transportation Grant Program Cycle 4 call for projects, and we'll be seeking an approval for this. Followed by item number 15, which is the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program. This is related to a potential project between Community Housing Works, MTS, and the City of San Diego. Item number 16 is the MOA with La Mesa to use the $2 million in commercial paper from the Transnet Debt Financing Program. And this concludes our agenda for the 15th. Are there any questions?
I've got a question. On item 10, I'm troubled by the way it's listed. Always in the past, it's been listed as the nominating committee had X number of applicants for the vice chair and chair. I think it does a disservice to Vice Chair Sanat and other applicants. It's not mentioned that the nominating committee found 1 candidate for chair and 2 for vice chair to be prepared and qualified. And I think it should be reflected as it has been in the past.
We can make that change.
Yeah, so it's a language change
Yeah.
under that. We can do that.
And could we get some clarification? I know it's not specifically about the agenda, but for that item, what's the process? You've got 2 for vice chair. If there are nominations from the floor, how does the process unfold?
The process is that under your your board policies and procedures, the board is allowed to take a preliminary vote, and so ultimately there would be a vote, a tally vote only, ranking candidates in the order in which they would be considered by the board by a formal vote. So whether you have 2, 3, 4, or 5, there would be nominations from the floor, then we'd have our slate of candidates finalized. The tally vote would order those candidates in the order in which they would be considered by the board by a formal vote, and then we would move through those candidates by a motion and a second, by a more formal process.
And then it goes to sudden death. Once that tally is taken, it's tally and weighted.
Again, yeah, then your formal vote is what is now your normal voting process, tally and weighted vote. And a candidate would require the majority of both the tally and the weighted vote in order to be elected.
Okay.
If the first candidate considered does not receive both of those, then the second candidate would be put up for formal consideration.
Thank you.
Well, just for clarification, so you have 3, 4 candidates, 1, 2, 3, 4, you would vote on each one separately or just?
Your first vote would order, everyone would get one vote, one tally vote to decide the order you will consider them in. Whoever comes to the top of that with the most tally votes for consideration would then require a motion and a second for whatever position they're nominated for. And if they're elected, that would be it. You wouldn't have any more votes. If they are not elected, if they don't receive the majority of the tally and weighted vote, you would go to number 2 from that preliminary vote with a motion, second, formal vote.
Good.
Thanks, John.
Clear? It's confusing, I know, but, okay.
For your January 12th board policy meeting, at this time, we do not have a proposed set agenda. However, we are recommending that we keep this meeting as scheduled at this time so that we can possibly consider any items that may come up.
Okay, so you get back with information if we are going to have that meeting, we will consider. Okay, any questions? And on this one, we do have to approve it.
Move approval with the one change.
And as noted, second, Councilmember Jones, please cast your votes. Okay. Voting is closed, and that's approved unanimously. We move on to the annual review and proposed amendments to board policies. John Kirk will fly us through that, John. Right?
As every year. This year, there are 3 overall categories of proposed amendments we're bringing to you for consideration. General proposed updates to board policies, these are the types that you see every year. Board policy updates that support the plan of excellence, and updates supporting implementation of AB 805. Of these 3 categories, today I'm going to be covering just the first 2 categories, the general updates and the plan of excellence. The next item on today's agenda will cover the new proposed board policies related to the auditor provisions of AB 805. All other proposed board policy and bylaw amendments related to AB 805 will be brought to you in your January meeting for consideration, and then the idea is that all of them would end up at the board an approximately February business meeting for final approval. The first policy that we'll look at today is Board Policy 3, the investment policy, attachment 1 to your report. And for reference, that is at page 5 of the report or page 23 on your tablets. Amendments to various sections of this policy are proposed. They pertain to the required credit ratings of specified investment instruments. These investment instruments receive ratings from Standard & Poor's or Moody's, like an A or an A-. And Government Code Section 53601 this year was amended to insert the concept of a ratings category. There have been questions from finance departments around the state trying to clarify if something is rated as an A-, does that qualify as an A or better? So what the Government Code Amendment did was to instead talk about a ratings category of A, recognizing that that would be A-, A, A+. Additionally, it recognized that some of these rating organizations don't all use the same nomenclature. One might have a AAA, that might be equivalent to an A+, and are allowed or equivalent rating by another organization. So ultimately, the proposed amendments to Board Policy 3 go in line with that. They, as it recognized in the legislative history, this is not intended in any way to loosen the investment requirements or the ratings requirements, but just to clarify that ambiguity. The next board policy is Board Policy 7, the Equal Employment Opportunity and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Programs, Attachment 2, beginning on page 14 or 32. This is a cleanup. We recognized that the information that we were receiving from our consultants and subcontractors in employment utilization reports was somewhat duplicative because we were receiving that same information in other reports that they were providing for us. So this amendment would delete the requirement for submission of the employment utilization reports. That allows us to streamline this process for our contractors and consultants, but we receive the same information for these other ones, so it maintains our oversight of DV utilization. Next one is Board Policy 11, Travel Expenses, Attachment 3, beginning at 17 or 35 on your tablets. The change there is updating the maximum per diem reimbursement rates for Sacramento and Washington, D.C. These are the two cities where our board members, committee members, and staff travel to the most, and we found that historically the numbers that we had were a little bit low, so this trues up those numbers to what we've seen from historical averages. Board Policy 12 is the next one, Sandag Service Bureau, Attachment 4, beginning at page 22 or 40 on your tablets. I'll spend a bit more time on this one. We have a few different categories of amendments proposed here. The three sections of the policy where changes are proposed, first of all, are project priorities and procedures section. Here, a new paragraph 3 is proposed to be added that would reserve the right to deny any request for service that is beyond the capabilities of Sandag's staff, data, and models. And this would help to be sure that we're working within the expertise of our staff as well as the focus and scale of our models. We've received historically some requests to do something for a very small development or even a store that might have 1,000 ADTs, and the scale of our model just isn't designed to accurately gauge what that impact would be. Paragraph 5 is proposed to be amended to clarify that final work products of the Service Bureau are subject to public disclosure in accordance with the California Public Records Act. New paragraph 6 is proposed to be added to this section to implement the 8-year life cycle policy for transportation modeling services pursuant to direction from this committee back at your May meeting. This means that the Service Bureau will support the current version of the transportation model and one prior release. Under the fees, charges, and pricing policy section, that's at page 23 of the report or 41 on your tablets. Proposed amendments would provide that all Service Bureau work shall be done pursuant to a written agreement regardless of the cost of work. Previously it had said only over a certain dollar threshold, but we recognize that even lower cost projects can involve complexities, and a written agreement will provide clarity about the scope of work and the terms under which that work is undertaken. The next section that we proposed amendments to is the conflict section, 23 of the report or 41 on your tablets. The current language there sets forth limitations on providing products and services that directly deal with legislative matters, propositions, or candidates for public office. Recent experience has shown that even when work is undertaken before a project qualifies for the ballot, it can still become politically divisive. The proposed amendments to this section would increase the scope of what is recognized as a political conflict, prohibiting Service Bureau work if the subject matter of the request is or is reasonably expected to be the subject of any filing with the San Diego County Registrar of Voters or applicable filing authority regarding an upcoming election. In addition, recognizing that that will involve some measure of discretion by staff in deciding that, in order to provide a measure of due process to those requesting Service Bureau work, a right of appeal to this committee as the Service Bureau's governing body is provided for staff denials of Service Bureau work.
John, before you leave that one, if an issue is going to the ballot, but a city government wants, they want it to have the public information, public meeting. Would they be precluded under the revision?
I think if they're asking the Service Bureau to report on something that is going to be on the ballot, that would still be precluded. And that would be true of your current language as well. But that ultimately is a
Could
board.
be appealed to the executive.
Could be appealed to the executive committee, and it's a board policy, it's not law, so they're your rules.
I'd like to see requests from city government that is faced with these things to be able to be, even whether it's going to a ballot and there's controversy associated with it. It seems to me that fairness, it's, we're having these things increasingly, they're coming to light, and I'll all be dealing with them under these rules. And it seems like that information should be out there so that, and I can understand the private parties part of it. But if the city would want that information.
Would you want to say something like voting member agencies? That would include just our cities and counties.
Yeah. Yeah, what I say in cities and the members, so.
Right.
I mean, think about that. I'd like to suggest, I think that would be, I think it's something that's needed. When you don't have a hand in people putting things together. Here we got a great idea for you. And if you're interested as a municipal agency or as a county, that you should, say, well, I'd like to see what the traffic says on this.
So are we suggesting having a carve out or just being mindful of that coming to the executive committee?
I would feel more comfortable if there was a specific language along with Mayor Morrison's suggestion would be for member agencies that requested that we would do it.
I would support that.
What maybe proposed language could be saying that we'll deny all requests for services other than those from a member agency, and then continue on. Insert that language.
Well, I say because we have member agencies that are non-voting member agencies, so I think we say voting member agencies.
Okay, and we can clean up, and we can even look at our operative legislation to make sure we have the right definition of that term.
Okay. So
Is that okay with everybody?
okay.
Great. The next board policy 32, the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission interest rate swap policy, attachment 5. This is one that we're required to review every year. Our management, director of finance, and outside financial consultants have reviewed this. No changes are proposed, but we're recommending that the board reapprove that policy as part of their annual review. The next board policy group are those supporting the Plan of Excellence. And the first one of those is Board Policy 15, the Records Management Policy, Attachment 6, at 39 or 57 on your tablets. Many of the proposed edits to this policy are a cleanup based upon changes to current law or SANDAG practices, but there's other more substantive amendments to this that I'll go over in a bit more detail. Section 1 there is proposed to be amended to clarify the broad applicability of this policy to both SANDAG employees as well as non-SANDAG employees who act on SANDAG's behalf. Non-SANDAG employees generally are defined as the board of directors and committee members, as well as those who do business on behalf of SANDAG, such as consultants or contractors. Language 2.1 is proposed to be amended to expand the types of records that SANDAG works with, including a lot more types of electronic records than had been in that policy before. The term SANDAG business record is also proposed to be more clearly defined, including everything that contains information related to the conduct of SANDAG's business, regardless of who prepares it or where it's maintained. And toward that end, language is also proposed clarifying that electronic records related to SANDAG business that are on personal devices or even home computers, those are also personal devices, are disclosable public records. And this is consistent with recent California Supreme Court case and the City of San Jose case on that issue. In section 3.2 through 3.6, additional language is proposed regarding records retention and disposal of records, including the need to preserve records when a CPRA request is received. And this addresses a recommendation from the Houston-Hennigan report regarding document deletions, and the language there that we have ultimately, it's drawn from the California Secretary of State's local government records management guidelines, which provide best practices in this area. And finally, language is proposed for sections 3.7 and 4 to better inform staff of proper file maintenance, including keeping files organized in approved locations. And this is intended to help assure that all records responsive to a request are identified and produced. One other note here is that we're also proposing language that mandates that all staff be trained on the records maintenance, record retention policies that are set forth in here. The next classic board policy that we look at is Board Policy 25, the Public Participation Plan Policy, attachment 7 to your report at 43 or 61 on your tablets. This provides an overview of the principles and practices that SANDAG uses to engage the public. The proposed amendment to this policy again supports implementation of the Plan of Excellence, and the focus of the amendment is on increased transparency and a recognition that the public has a right to expect SANDAG to conduct business in an efficient, fair, and impartial manner, and with the utmost integrity to promote and maintain the public's confidence and trust. By federal law, this policy is subject to a 45-day public comment period. Pending your action today, it would be released for public comment, as with past times when we've done that, through everything from newspapers to social media, and any comments that we receive would be brought back to the Board of Directors when they finally consider the policy. This concludes the proposed board policy updates governing general updates and those supporting the Plan of Excellence. The next item on today's agenda will focus on a new proposed board policy focusing on the new audit committee and the independent auditor under AB 805, and the balance of the proposed board policy and bylaw amendments implementing other requirements of AB 805 will be brought to you at your January meeting for consideration. So on this item, in terms of these policies, the executive committee is asked to discuss the proposed board policy amendments, attachments 1 through 7, and to either recommend that the Board of Directors approve those proposed amendments as amended, or direct staff to return to the executive committee for further discussion or review, and to recommend that the Board of Directors renew the annual delegation of authority to the executive director pursuant to Board Policy 3, the investment policy, and its approval of Board Policy 32, the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission Interest Rate Swap Policy, attachment 5. That concludes the report on these, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on them.
Thank you. Thank you. John, on 32, I guess I'm just kind of questioning, why do we have something proposed before us that has no change, but you want us to go ahead and approve it? I mean, what's the rationale?
The rationale on that one is that is one that requires that you consider it every year and basically true it up, make sure that it's as you want it to be. So the other ones don't specifically require review every year, but that particular policy, it mandates that the Board of Directors every year look at it, make sure that they're still comfortable with what is there, and to reapprove it every year. That's unique policy in that respect.
Okay, so this one has embedded in it that has to be looked at every. So
Yeah.
what is an interest rate swap? I don't even know what that is.
I could touch it, but if Andre's here, he could explain it a lot better.
Sure. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but it just
Something simple for,
yeah, something very, put it at 5th grade level.
It's swapping interest rates.
Interest rate swap.
Thank you,
It's
Sam.
like, it sounds, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so in 2008,
financing your credit cards.
in 2008, SANDAG issued $600 million of variable rate interest, and we didn't want to take the risk of interest rates going up with the variables, so what we did is we synthetically fixed them with the interest rate swap. So there's a counterparty that takes the variable rate risk, and then we end up with a fixed rate.
Okay, so this is a mechanism for us to lower our interest rate, and it's all done legally and
Or to stabilize.
To fix it, not to necessarily lower it.
to fix, okay, to get it fixed as opposed, okay, so be able to swap it so it's a fixed rate instead of a variable rate.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, I was just kind of curious why it was in front of us. It's, here, approve this, but we're not changing anything on it, but okay, that was more my question. And then I get, on the audit, are you going to talk about the auditor?
That's
next
next
item.
item.
Next item, okay, thank you.
Can we deal with, should we deal with this one
Yes,
first?
yes.
Yes, please.
If there's no further questions, we're in a position we can act on this.
If you'd like to, and then we have that one change to carve out for the voting member agencies.
On board
Oh,
policy
yeah,
as well.
sorry, we have.
I have one public speaker. Heather?
Hello. So Catherine, and on page 62 for your public policy, I think that instead of having it only as roads, transportation, environmental management, housing, open space, air quality, energy, fiscal management, economic development, public safety, that you actually use what is in AB 805, which added water quality and supply, infrastructure, solid waste, open space and including habitat. So I think you should actually use the wording that is in the law, in the state law, for all the different things that you're responsible for. And and I'm glad that you put it in housing, because one of the main reasons, one of the things you are responsible is for housing. But Sandag staff always tries to tell you it's not in their purview, and it really is. So that's just one of my issues. My other one is, with the federal review, you now have, you've changed your board policy for the public participation plan, actually to say, that there is discrimination. And, for me, I always think that there is discrimination, specifically in housing in San Diego, because of the lack of financial comprehensive annual reports or proper funds for both the city, this assessor agency, the oversight board, and Civic San Diego and San Diego Commission. So I'm glad that that's there, but I think we should change it. Also, what I really think is discriminatory, especially for low-income people, is that you guys do not allow people to come in here and give you handouts at meetings, because you have to do it 3 days in advance, or you're not allowed to present it. And that's discrimination of the public compared to Sandag staff and Sandag board members, where you guys can actually have a PowerPoint presentation, not a part of your documentation, present it. And other people cannot even present PowerPoint presentations or paperwork unless they do it 3 days later. So I think that is very much discrimination, specifically against the poor. And so I would like you to actually look at that again, or I think I should actually go through your discrimination process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ken, did you want to comment on
No, and we can take a look in terms of aligning the requirements for,
with the state language?
yeah, with the state language and stuff.
If I could point out there, though, the language in the policy does not purport to be exhaustive. It says such as, so it's merely giving examples.
Right.
We can take a look at that.
Okay.
I would move approval with the revision for the carve-out for the voting jurisdictions.
Okay. Second to that, Morrison. Any further questions or discussion? Please cast your votes. And voting is closed. And that's approved unanimously. We'll move on then to that item that John referred to, item number 6. Good morning, Diane. You're going to help us with this?
Yeah, do you mind if I interject real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
Interject quick.
Yeah. Back at your November 3rd meeting, we brought you kind of an overview of AB 805 implementation, and we had kind of a draft schedule for a lot of the different items that we're going to need to be bringing to the board over the next few months. One of the comments that a lot of discussion surrounded, hey, can't we had, I think, the schedule to actually implement the audit committee and get an independent performance auditor hired. We thought initially would take us through the end of the year. The feedback we got from you was really to pull that back as much as we can and try to speed that up. So that's why we're bringing this today. If everything looks okay, if we have fairly minor comments, your action today, we could actually bring it to the board on December 15th and look to next quarter to actually seat go through the process of seating your first audit committee. And so Diane's here to help us out. As you know, she's worked with us on many special projects, She was a former chief deputy executive director, and in her prior life, she was also head of Caltrans audits and stuff, so very familiar with the audit process, performance audits and whatnot. So just to sort of set the stage.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here with you this morning. I would like to let you know that the development of this policy was informed by a number of things. First and foremost, the language of AB 805 guidance that is promulgated by the local government auditors, the Association of Local Government Auditors, the construct of the San Diego City Auditor's Office and the city's audit committee, as well as SANDAG's policy committee policies and the selection process used for the ITOC members. Mayor Faulkner offered the assistance of the city auditor, and I took full advantage of that offer. I met with the chief deputy and got a lot of wonderful information and help from them, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate as we move forward with this effort. During this presentation, I'd like to give you an overview of the statutory mandates included in the policy by section, but focus on those items that support its implementation, as well as those items where the executive committee and the board will have discretion. The policy was crafted with the objective of giving you and the board flexibility in the implementation of the requirements. So in the first part of the policy, we talk about the purpose, specifying the functions of the audit committee and the independent performance auditor. The section 2, the first 3 sections I'll go through, you'll find on page 5 of your attachment, page 75 on your tablet. The second part of the policy deals with governance and the role of the audit committee. In the language in AB 805 specifies that the audit committee will consist of 5 voting members with 2 board members and 3 public members. AB 805 is silent on how the officers will be selected and if there will be alternates to the members. The proposed policy is consistent with the process we use for other policy advisory committees, with 2 exceptions. In this case, it's suggesting that the chair will appoint the PAC chair and vice chair, but unlike the normal process, for a 2-year term, and the chair will also select the alternates. And this is due to the requirements, the unique requirements that will be required from the board members. The third section is the authority of the audit committee. The legislation gives the audit committee 3 major roles in terms of authorities. They're to recommend to the board which firm to contract with to perform the financial audits, the annual financial audits. They're to recommend the hiring of the independent performance auditor, who may only be removed for cause by a vote of 2/3 of the audit committee and the board. They're to approve the annual audit plan after discussion with the independent auditor, and they're to recommend internal control guidelines to be adopted by the board. This section is basically a recitation from AB 805 with 3 notable exceptions. AB 805 does not dictate whether the independent performance auditor is an agency, is a consultant firm or a contract employee of the agency. The proposed policy is drafted in a way to provide the board with flexibility to direct the audit committee and whether to hire a firm or an individual. The second exception is the additions authorize the audit committee to oversee the implementation of necessary corrective action that comes through to their attention through an audit or investigative report. It's a logical next step for them. The draft policy also proposes that the cause for removal be specified. And what we've included in there is not to be limited to, but to include incompetence, dishonesty, unethical behavior, violation of state or federal laws, or the failure to maintain required professional certifications. So we've called those items out specifically in the policy. The next section, selection of committee members. The AB 805 is silent on the selection of audit committee members, but the draft policy proposes criteria for members for the board and for the public members. a criteria for a board member, for example, would be, and I think this is a pretty important one, that would be the willingness to work through the committee to pursue opportunities for improvements identified through the agency's audit products. The selection process for the public members is a hybrid of the City of San Diego's selection process for public members and how we select members for ITOC. The draft policy includes accounting or auditing experience for public members, a screening committee, and approval by the majority of the board. The policy does not address in any way what stipend or compensation might be provided to public members and to board members. The next section on page 78 of your tablet is the selection of the independent performance auditor. And AB 805 is silent on the term and the selection basis for the auditor, but the draft policy proposes a 2-year term, and it also has education experience and certifications or license minimums. The next section of page 78 on your tablet is the responsibilities and authorities of the independent performance auditor. Most of the responsibilities in this section are specified in 805, such as the requirement that the auditor prepare an annual audit plan, perform planned audits in accordance with governmental auditing standards, that they have the power to appoint, employ, or remove staff, have unrestricted access to employees, information and records for both audits and investigations into the claims of fraud, waste, or impropriety, and that they have the ability to examine parties under oath. The draft policy also specifies that the audits and investigation products will be subject to the California Public Records Act. So we've included all of those mandates in the policy, but then we've proposed 4 enhancements. One, the standards for audits are defined, the government auditing standards, but it doesn't call out standards for doing investigations. And following the city auditor's example, the draft policy requires the auditor to follow procedures recommended by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners Manual for investigations. So it gives some framework for those investigations from institution that is expertise in carrying out those. But we don't cite those standards, but we, like the city auditor, recommend that they follow that process, the process that's specified in that manual. And the proposed policy includes steps in addition to getting to the issue of the oath, the ability to interview folks under oath. We included in there steps that the independent auditor has to take to invoke the under oath provision, and that's to work with legal counsel to mitigate risk to the organization to make sure that makes sense in the case that they're proposing to use that measure. With regard to the California Public Records Act, we took that a step further. We'd like to include in the policy that not only are they subject to the Records Act, but we post the results of audits and investigations on the SANDAG website. This is a practice that is emerging at the state level as well. The other item, there are 2 more actually. We included a provision that subjects the performance auditor's authority to the annual audit plan and to the budget approved by the board to execute that plan. We've also included in the policy the requirement that the auditor use the SANDAG procurement management and hiring rules and policies. So that concludes the overview of that policy. As Kim mentioned, adoption of this by the board at the December meeting will expedite the establishment of the committee and the hire of the auditor substantially, probably up to 6 months earlier, possibly. Another benefit of establishing this on an expedited basis would be to have the existing Sandag principal internal auditor bring audit matters to the committee to familiarize the members with the audit process and with the results of how we have, constructed presently. Staff is in the process of gathering information on the pros and cons of hiring a consulting firm or a contract employee to serve as the independent performance auditor, and will bring that information to the board for direction at a later meeting. We're also developing the costs associated with the creation of the committee and the position itself, and we'll bring that forward in a future meeting. So today we're asking you to discuss the proposed new policy and either recommend that the board approve the new policy or direct staff to return to the executive committee for further discussion and review. And I'm delighted to answer questions at this point.
Thank you.
Answer questions at this point.
Thank you, Diane. I have one public speaker, but if there's any questions.
Yeah, just thank you very much. On the hiring of the auditor themselves, you mentioned an outside organization or a contract employee. I'd like to have possibly, I don't know, or maybe our next meeting, if there's pros and cons of that individual, whoever that person is, to work directly for the board and not necessarily be an employee of, I guess, the organization. We would be an employee of the organization, but report directly to the board, and I didn't hear that mentioned at all.
They would report directly to the audit committee, subject to the board's approval of.
But I guess I would want that person not hired by the executive, by
A contract, you want a contract employee.
I want an employee that answers to the board.
Well,
Right.
but it's directly has to answer to the audit committee.
And the audit committee as well, but I guess as opposed to being hired by who?
Yeah, it's not going to be somebody
director.
that would report in the normal.
No.
You got it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted,
And there's, I guess there's the hybrid version where we might have a current person that gets started on this while we're going through the lengthy process of obtaining an outside consulting company so that we can get, the work product doesn't have to wait until, at the earliest, we're probably going to be, what, June or when the chart came back, we said do it fast. Doing it fast with all the things that we have to go through to hire an outside firm is probably going to be June. And I think there's a fair amount of work that can be teed up between now and June. So
I just wanted the clarification.
It's a hybrid version.
That entity, whatever it is, does not report to the executive director, but reports to the board.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
And the 3 public members who serve, we can suggest those members, and could those members like be a city auditor, or? Because they're public, I mean, they're not the board, they're not, so it could be possibly.
They could be. I don't see any prohibition to that, John.
I would only say, you want to make sure there's not any kind of a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Who appoint those? The board?
Just wanted to put that out there.
You guys can take care of that salary all by yourself.
Okay.
The chair.
But just a follow-up question, sorry. Who would appoint those public members? The board?
The board.
Not the board.
Well, you said the chair?
Well,
No, the chair would, go ahead.
I'm sorry. They would go through the selection process. The chair and the board ultimately would approve their selection.
Yeah. There's not.
Dan, this policy as proposed, if it's approved by the executive committee, will appear on our website for a period of time prior to coming to the board, or how publicly will the public see this proposed policy?
Generally, do we do that, John?
It's public, I mean, it's public right now in terms of it's on the website as part of this agenda item. It'll be public with that. If there's something that the committee would like us to do in addition to that, we're more than happy.
I'm just anxious that the public sees that we're moving forward quickly, that it's a thorough proposal, and it fits with many of our other agencies, and that we're responding to the direction, and they have an opportunity to weigh in some form. So,
What we'll do as we go along is make note of each significant milestone that the board reaches. Once you get through the process and you adopt a policy, we'll tweet it, we'll press release it, we'll,
Okay,
we'll
good,
keep pushing
good.
that. We'll mark each major step.
because it's not only, I think we need to look at this from an internal standpoint of how well it will work and achieve its goals. We need to look at it from an external standpoint as well as to how it is responding to trust and issues. Yeah.
Maybe the next chairman can go out.
Oh, no, wait.
City council and region, every community planning group will
Thank
get
you,
the
Ron.
word out.
You
Okay.
have one, but can I just clarify one thing? So, we have an independent performance auditor that currently works for Sandag,
Right.
reports to executive management. So we have a whole internal audit plan. And are you guys, would this committee's preference, or the board's preference, to actually have that function right now begin reporting to the new audit committee once it's started? You can, the benefit we see is you can see what the internal audit program has been, in terms of all the, costing for the audits we've done.
Isn't there two different things going on?
It's two different, so that this would not be your independent performance auditor that you would still need to hire, whether it's through the firm or the contract employee. This is actually an internal audit function we feel that.
This is more focused on the financial audit of the companies we're working with.
No, it's actually our performance auditor that's internal to the staff. It currently reports to management.
Okay.
If we transition that and have them report to the audit committee initially, we could actually, share with the committee.
Okay, so
what was done.
that could fill the interim role.
Right.
Okay, we don't have to make a decision on that.
No, you don't, but that was really what was keyed up. I don't know if this.
That could be the hybrid system that we're talking about.
Yeah, in the transition type, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, while.
It might be best to form the committee and then ask them
Yes.
if they want to take all that on initially.
Does that position go away once we get this?
Right, that was my
Not
question.
necessarily, no.
You get both.
You could have both, so it's really up to you and the board.
Okay, somebody's got to explain that more.
Well, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it seems duplicative.
Right.
Okay. Catherine?
Hi, just another part of public utility code that Sandag is under for 42.360.1 and preparing the updated to the regional comprehensive plan. It's the intent of the legislator H, the consolidated agency, must maintain data, maps, and other information developed in the course of formulating the regional comprehensive plan in a form suitable to assure a consistent review of development trends and other information for the availability and use of by other government agencies and private organizations. So now, 11 years that I've come here, I'm asking that there be consistency in the seismic hazard maps between the city, port, the airport, Sandag, Caltrans, state geologist. Every single one of you have different maps. And when I came before Sandag, starting 11 years ago, staff would tell me that it's not in their purview to make sure that there's consistency within the maps. But it is. It's your job. So, that's one thing that I hope that the new audit committee would actually investigate. Is it your job? What is Sandag's responsibilities? Are you guys, for instance, for seismic also, are you responsible for confirming or denying the active faulting at the Navy Broadway complex? I believe you are through your agreements with the Department of Defense, but your staff again says it's not. So that's another issue I hope your audit committee will actually look at. And basically, it's about consistency. And then also, of course, about follow-through, written follow-through. And for example, during your executive committee about a year and a half ago starting, you told staff to see is airport revenues allowable to be used for transportation projects outside of the airport. Your staff was supposed to give you a written communication back and present it to you, but it hasn't been presented because the airport authority staff differs from what Sandag staff thinks. And so you guys are also, all the poor people in San Diego are missing out on all these billions of airport revenues that could be used for transportation projects like it's used in New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Denver, so many. And so I hope that that's one of the things that the audit committee would actually look at. Can Sand Egg use the airport revenue dollars or not? It's either a yes or no question, and the solution, of course, is to go to our state attorney general and ask them that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public testimony. So we should be.
Do we need action on number 6?
Yes.
Yes. So we can approve subject to the staff.
Recommendation to the board.
Recommendation of the board. Okay.
Move approval.
And then at the board, you can come back with some more detail on these items that we discussed. Okay, I'm sorry, I heard Mayor Morrison, Mayor Voss, second. Okay, please cast your votes. Okay, voting is closed. Now it's approved unanimously. We'll move on to the final item on our agenda, the Service Bureau 2017 year-end status report. Cheryl Mason and Ray Major will provide this report for us.
Good morning. In accordance with Board Policy 12, we're here to talk about the financial performance of the Service Bureau. As you recall, the Service Bureau provides customized data and reports for member agencies and other private and public organizations on a fee-for-service basis. The report addresses the financial performance for fiscal year 2017, and the summary is shown on the slide. The bottom line in the summary is that Service Bureau brought in revenue of $524,017 from projects worked on during the fiscal year. Total expenses, including non-project costs related to management and business development, were $501,000. Let's see, 501,029. I can't seem to say the number. Meaning revenues exceeded expenses by $22,988, or 4.6%. And we worked on 55 projects during the fiscal year, providing information and analysis to support both private sector and public sector clients. These projects, as you can see, range from multi-year comprehensive feasibility studies to transportation modeling to small economic and demographic data analysis. You can see from the table that our transportation modeling services are the mainstay of the Service Bureau, with 48 projects in that category. Half of the modeling projects are from member agencies, including the City of Oceanside, Encinitas, San Marcos, Santee, County of San Diego, and we actually finished a couple of community plan updates in the City of San Diego also. We'd like to take this opportunity to update you on one particular project, and I'm going to turn that over to Ray to give you some comments.
Thank you. So in May, you, the executive committee, directed us to begin work on a Qualcomm, proposed Qualcomm site redevelopment project. And at the core, this project that we did is very similar to 48 other projects that we did this year for the Service Bureau, the transportation model. There's one notable difference between this project and other projects, and that is that we had two customers. We had both the opponents and the proponents of the Soccer City site as customers of this project, and we needed to negotiate all of the inputs for the model with these two parties. We have spent a significant amount of time answering questions for these clients, and that's the only thing that would be different than any other project that we've done. In June, we ran the assumptions that they gave us, and we did the preliminary model runs. From August through November, there were significant questions that were raised. There were technical questions that were raised about our modeling and how we did it by one of the clients. We've answered those questions, and we've completed the review of those questions, and we've now finalized the report. And that report is ready to be released today. As a quick summary, the model that we ran was a mixed-use development with a high-density redevelopment of the Qualcomm site. It's bordered by I-15, I-8, Friars Road, and Fenton Parkway. There were a number of land use assumptions that both engineers agreed on. This is important from a negotiation perspective because if you change the inputs, then, oh, sorry. These are the approved land use uses that we had. These were agreed on by both engineering firms. We put these in the model. If we change these, we were actually changing the model. This is the one model run that we ran. There were some also there were some agreed upon network changes to the transportation network that are different than what we had in the regional plan. Most notably, the fact that the purple line was removed from the analysis. So any data that we look at from here is not directly comparable when we look at transit with the regional plan numbers. With that, we have finished the modeling, and what we have really is a final result that is one possible future that may happen in 2035 if this development goes onto that site. There can be professional disagreements about how these numbers are calculated, and I'm sure there will be with this particular project. But in my professional judgment, we have a high degree of confidence that the model that we ran is giving sound outputs given the inputs that we put into the model. So at noon today, what we are doing is meeting with both sides, both of our clients. We're presenting to them a final report, which includes population and employment numbers for the site. It includes things like mode share, so what type of transportation the people are going to be using. It includes things like ridership at the trolley stop, how many people actually stay on the site, who live there and work there and recreate there, as well as the average daily trips that are going to be generated by the site. In addition to that, we'll be giving them maps, plots, and data, and there'll be a PowerPoint presentation that will be presented. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Cheryl to conclude the presentation.
So just a couple of comments on some planned projects for this fiscal year 2018. We've already started work on some of the projects that are shown on the slide here, and we're in the process of negotiating or scoping the work for a couple of the others, including this high-level feasibility study for the quiet zone between the Middletown and Old Town segment of the rail corridor, transportation modeling for the Harbor Drive corridor study, and also some new community plan updates for the city of San Diego. Here's where we need some guidance. There are several time-sensitive requirements that will need to be met to support the development of the San Diego Forward, the Regional Plan 2019 update, as well as other agency efforts such as the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Given the likelihood that we will face some workload challenges going forward, we are requesting that the Executive Committee set the following priorities for our transportation modeling work. The first priority would go to the San Diego Forward 2019 Regional Plan and other agency priorities. And the second priority would go to member and other government agency projects. And the third priority would go to private sector development projects. Last slide was talking about a couple of upcoming Service Bureau improvements for this fiscal year. John already highlighted some of those through Board Policy 12 for the Service Bureau, so those will help the efficiency of our operation here. And we are also actually based on a review of the costs for providing transportation modeling services, specifically using the activity-based model. An increase in fees is anticipated this fiscal year to ensure full cost recovery of the services rendered, including the staff time it takes to run the models and perform additional extensive quality control throughout the process. This concludes our presentation, and we'll have to look.
Any questions? Any other board members? Well, I have one public question. What you would like is us to help you establish those priorities. Right now, we don't have a priority list.
No.
Yeah, so your 3 levels then give us a way to assess as we get. You got too much work. Is that what it is?
Just a follow-up question. Would these criteria, are these criteria related to the Qualcomm study, or these are suggestions to move forward?
It's a future.
So future, okay.
Yeah, it's all, this is prospective. It's in it, and I was being somewhat jokingly saying that they've got a lot of requests to do things. And it's helping them to manage the priorities, what they accept. And you know, I know Mayor Desmond and the airport are part of a port proposal to do a pretty massive study, and I know they've been asking, can we expedite this? So there's a lot of stuff out there.
I don't see that on the priority, on the priority list here at all.
Yeah, your other agencies.
You're
in the second priority.
Second one? Okay.
Two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second fiddle.
All right, thank you. Second fiddle, that's all right.
Okay.
Better than being no fiddle.
One quick question, Cheryl. The budget numbers that we presented for the past fiscal year do not represent what the amount of work that we've done for the Qualcomm site. Is that correct?
No, the Qualcomm site is included in the transportation modeling category. We did show a loss on that particular project, but overall we still came in the black.
But the fiscal numbers you showed were for 2016, 2017.
2017, yes, correct.
So
there's work that was
there will be
yeah,
additional-
so they're not, that's not current
Complete.
right now.
Correct. We are still continuing to work on the project, and we'll be showing a loss this fiscal year on that project as well.
Okay.
I just have a quick question on the priorities. So would you still be able to provide this similar level of service if for private sector that you're providing now? Because you get $500,000 in billing and from last year, I guess, for fiscal year 17. Would this priority level then cause maybe only half of those projects to be taken on? I'm just kind of curious what the push is here.
Well, the hope is that we're able to get to all of the projects.
Okay.
However, we have the regional plan that has real deadlines to meet things like RENA, and and depending on how many scenarios the board requests, is going to take capacity for us to do. In addition to that, we're working with the City of San Diego on many of their community plans, which is additional resources that we need to put towards that. These are all in the same time frame. That's the problem in this next fiscal year. And what we're hoping is that what we can do is prioritize agency work and member agency work before we take on some private industry work. But we're hoping we can do all of it. It's just that there's a lot of work coming in this next year.
Yeah, I'm just hoping you can provide a similar level of service, and I get that you got to do this other stuff first, but this is also the people's data, and we should be able to provide it to them in a timely fashion if possible, as opposed to just say no, we can't.
Right now we have first come, first serve, and that's part of the problem. It's not, you're pushing projects too far down the line.
Okay.
I do want to make clear, though, we do have, keep on the schedule for the regional plan. It's the same folks that are doing the modeling, and really we need these team members here to actually work on the regional plan to get it done in time.
Right.
So, are there going to be impacts on private sector clients? Yes, there will be. I mean, we can't say no, but it's probably going to be, it may be delayed. Maybe, yeah, we can get to it, but it's going to take.
Well, as long as it's a reasonable amount of time, and it's nothing years out.
I don't think it's years out, but it's
That's not it.
out.
The city has some very aggressive goals with their community plans that we want to also help them with. So, I mean, it could be that they'd be in the summer or later.
Okay. I've got one request to speak.
Mr. Morrow, Mr. Robert, I had a question. What category does Qualcomm modeling come under?
Well, that was private sector request.
And so if it's a private sector, why do you have a loss? Why isn't there full cost recovery on that project?
We estimated that project to be $5,000, which was more than, factoring in some additional costs that we figured we would need, but it was clearly more than that.
Okay, so why can't you go back to the proponents and get a full cost recovery if it's a private project?
We gave the cost estimate for $5,000. That's how we've been doing it.
The rules that we were operating under that are being modified now will allow us going forward to do things differently.
So we're requesting that there's a contract with each job that has the scope in it, and also then we would be able to recover more of the cost.
Okay. Marco Sessa, representing Sudbury Properties.
Hi, thank you. My name is Marco Sessa, and I'm with Sudbury Properties. I was here in May when we made the initial request that the service bureau perform the modeling for the SDCCU site map. And I'm I'm here really to, on the private side, we've been involved in a number of model runs, typically through our traffic engineers who make those requests to the Service Bureau. I'm simply here, we haven't seen the final results, but I'm simply here to express the appreciation for the Service Bureau's work. The results have come out over months that took time to get to the point today. I haven't seen the results, so we don't know if we're going to support necessarily what our concerns have been about what was being proposed. But I can tell you that the team here has done an amazing job of being patient, listening to the two sides differ significantly, and I probably apologize for a little bit of that, but I can tell you, Cheryl, Ray, Mike, who's not here, Rick, and others, I just want to commend their work, their effort, because this effort was taken seriously, it was done impartially, and we're thankful on the private side. It's usually blind to us. We ask our traffic engineer to have a model run, and we get data, and then off we go. So I just wanted to express that appreciation, and I hope, and a little concerned when I hear that private projects could get delayed because we're in a serious housing crisis, and community plan updates in the city of San Diego should move forward, and it would be rather disappointing if there's significant delays on those projects.
Okay, thank you.
If that's okay. I had a couple questions on, I wanted to hear from Mr. Sesa first on the agreed upon network assumptions in the Colton area. And it says site network changes for site access points. Are the ones below, are you referring, those 4 access points, are you referring to the ones below, or are they?
No, sorry, those 4 access points are the actual ingress, egress points from the Qualcomm site itself. So right now there's one way to get into Qualcomm, and there's the back way, but when the development will be built out, there'd be 4 ways, so the traffic would go in different directions, and we needed to code that into our network system to be able to model that.
Thank you for that. And it says 4 arterial projects removed. We just voted on at the council to move forward with the Phyllis Place connection. So when you're saying it's removed, what does that mean? Because we voted to make it a throughway.
So when we met in May and June to discuss what the parameters were going to be for the model, we met with both sides, both engineering teams, and these are the projects that they asked us to take out, saying that in essence they didn't think they would be complete by 2035 and would be impacting the project. So these were taken out. Now these, obviously, we could have left them in, but there was agreed upon that we would take these out.
But now that it's in and it makes a major traffic impact, especially along Mission, what was the name of that road? Mission, does it go back in?
Well, at this point it wouldn't. At this point it would be a change to the model, and we would have to rerun the model. We have to change the network. We would have to rerun the model. It probably wouldn't affect the number of trips or the data that we're providing. What it would do is it would change the distribution of how the auto traffic would leave the site potentially. So some of the numbers, we give them information on each link in terms of how many trips there would be, what the impact would be. Some of those numbers might change, but we couldn't do that without rerunning the entire model. And I don't know if that's an issue, John, with board policy as well.
But also it doesn't, this model run is just to provide data for this particular job, so it doesn't impact what the city has done. When we do our updated runs for the regional plan, incorporate that.
Just one more. I know that part of the Mission Bay, Mr. Sesa would know more about this than I do. There's supposed to be, as part of the Mission Bay plan, another, I think it's right south of the IKEA, right where the road ends there, the library. I think that was supposed to go over and be another arterial to go over the river, especially for public safety, fire trucks and so forth. That's supposed to be in the plan. It's not there for the money. I mean, it was funded to be there, and the money just got poofed away with the studies that never went anywhere. And so I don't, is that? I'm hoping we can build that, Mr. Sesa.
I know the history of that one. When it was
But I mean,
It was a
that's in
requirement
the.
of the developers to fund it through the city. The city took the money,
Yeah.
and then because a certain council person said you're gonna put shade on the fishes in the river,
I know exactly who that is.
okay, the city stopped. They didn't refund the money, at
No.
least at that time. So I don't know.
Yes, our company was involved in that project,
$2 million.
and one of the projects that we worked on provided a significant amount of funding for that. The reason that it was agreed to be removed from the traffic modeling, the Mission City or Kent Parkway Bridge, was because the citizens initiative that was prepared for the stadium site specifically excluded the provision of that bridge. And so the goal of this analysis was to try to get to a best of an understanding of what the traffic circulation would be under what is being proposed under that initiative.
Okay, I understand that, I get that, okay. But yeah, there was $2 million and it just disappeared.
And
close to four.
And
How much? What?
Our share when we originally funded it was over $3 million.
Oh, well.
And in fairness, I judge by what I read in the paper yesterday, the proposal by San Diego State is not showing
It's not
any
showing.
connection going over the river either.
Right.
So there's a consistency. Anyway.
I can address that if you'd like.
No. I'll let, if the city wants it, they can build it.
I
They
just
were
wondered
paid
if
to
the
do it.
assumptions were taking that into account or not, because it's supposed to be there.
Anyway, okay. This is really to bring you up to date on how the Service Bureau is performing and to set a priority list for this coming year. So it's a...
We need a motion for the priority list?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Second.
Okay, I got a motion in the second. I want to hear Mayor Morrison and Mayor Voss. Any further discussion? Please cast your vote. Voting is closed, and that's approved unanimously. Thank you.
Oh, wait, hold on.
That was the previous one.
Man, now you're going fast.
That's the vote. It's now approved unanimously. Thank you. We need to get into the other room. Okay, this is adjourned.